it's all true.
Okay. Alright, let's do this. So, today is November 7th, N7 Day. For Mass Effect, if you have no idea, N7 Day was... The N7 program was a thing in the Mass Effect universe and the Mass Effect lore. And so, BioWare kind of decided to make November 7th N7 Day, where they would do special things like... they'd release new content or have some cool thing or video or something that they showed. This N7 Day, not a damn thing. I mean, I think the thing they did was they added some $8 skins to Anthem that looked like Krogan. And that was kind of lame, because Anthem is dying. Anthem is dead, as far as I'm concerned. It just hasn't stopped moving yet. Like Septus is starting to set in, and it's not going to last long. But I want to do a couple videos, or rather one really long video, but I don't do really long videos, so I'm going to make this a series of videos, and we'll see how this works. What I wanted to do is a set of videos on what Mass Effect is, why it needs to be saved, and how I would save it. What I would do to fix Mass Effect. And to start off, you have to explain what Mass Effect is, and then why it's broken. What does that mean exactly? Why is it worth saving, and how would you go about doing that? Briefly, to explain this, I'll use an example. I wanted to play Mass Effect again. I've played Mass Effect a bunch of times, all the way through all 3 games. Trying to get as much stuff, DLC, stuff unraveled and revealed and so on as it could. And I had heard someone joke about how they wanted to do the Mass Effect trilogy, but no one wants to play Mass Effect 1 because the combat is so janky. And I was like, well, that's not fair. That's not cool. I mean, it was an early game, and it's from a little while ago, but that's not really a fair assumption. And then I'm playing the game, Mass Effect 1, and my 2 squad mates are shooting me in the back, trying to hit the broadside of a crate, because there are bad guys hiding behind the crate. And I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough. The combat in this was actually pretty janky. So why did the first one take off at all? What made this series so good? What is Mass Effect? Why? The thing that made it cool was the characters. I got to Game 2. Game 1, going through this briefly. Game 1, it was the world building. This was not Star Trek. This isn't Star Wars. This isn't Battlestar Galactica or something, but it does have a very fleshed out lore. There's a lot of characterization and history going on. There's constant references to things that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and so on. And then eventually 50,000 years ago and further. But that's getting into it a little too in depth. But the first game is the world building. It's basically a shooter game where you have it's you and your squad. Your squad are these 2 AI-controlled characters. You run around shooting stuff, and they built a story around it. And the story's good. The story's very good, actually. The combat's okay. BioWare has done a lot of the Star Wars games, so it has, I'm going to call them space magic or force powers, because that seems the most apt. It's just some sort of magic power, space magic that you have that you can use to knock guys down or protect yourself or what have you. And it has some very nice mechanics. For the time it came out, it was pretty good. They experimented with a bunch of stuff, and that leads into what makes Mass Effect Mass Effect. Something I don't think gets mentioned enough is that this game experimented every single game. Like, they tried something new with each one, where it's like, people were complaining about this. They said it was kind of boring. So they got rid of the finding deposits landing on planets, running around with your Mako, finding a deposit, doing a little mini game, and great, you've got platinum. they got rid of that. They got rid of the Mako entirely. It never came back until the fourth game, but we'll get into that in a bit. So then in the second game, what did they experiment with? The planet scanning, which was very tedious. They replaced the Mako with the Hammerhead, which is the vehicle I really liked. And, you know, what I'm saying is every single one of them experimented, changed the character creation and upgrade mechanism, or it changed the way armor worked, or it changed the way weapons worked, or it changed some aspect of exploration. And I think it was the second game, I was playing through again, went through the first game, got through the second one, and when it was very early on in the second game, it's like, this is why this game was so awesome. And it was the second thing, the thing that Mass Effect 2 was the best at, possibly the best at all of them at, which was the characters, of course. I mean, you talk to Mordin Solus for like 5 minutes, and it's like, this game is awesome. You got a big smile on your face. This is fantastic. And you have Arya T'Loak, you have, Liara shows up again. All the characters who were fun in the first one show up again, unless they got killed, and I don't think, well, a few characters could have gotten killed, but not many. Anyway, it's the characterization. And the third game kind of tied everything together, brought all of the characters back, or as many as possible, and brought in a better game mechanic, better armor mechanic, better... They got rid of the boring stuff. Didn't have a really good vehicle thing. I mean, that was kind of the cool thing that people liked in Mass Effect 1 was the Mako. I personally thought it was a tedium generator, but whatever, some people liked it. I preferred the hover tank, the Hammerhead in the second game, but I understand those missions with the Hammerhead tend to be a lot lighter. And it doesn't really do a lot of exploring until the Overlord DLC, and even then you're just going from location to location. It's a nice bus ride. And that's all. It's not till Andromeda you actually get to drive around, and driving around actually does something. It does something meaningful. So the first three games, focusing on those, what really made them great was, one, the characterization. The characters stole the show, particularly from the second game on. I mean, the relationship with Jack, I loved Zaid, Masani, like all of them are fun. Even the boring characters have their moments. Like Caden, Ashley, Jacob Taylor, Miranda Lawson, most humans actually, thinking about it. Even the boring-ass characters had their moment to shine and had some cool stuff about them, and they have their fans. Some people really like some of those characters. Some people prefer the aliens like Rex, Grunt, and of course Garrus Vakarian, because they're fun. They were very enjoyable, and the more dialogue this game gave the characters, the better the whole game got. So things that made Mass Effect, and made it great were the characterization, first. 2 was the world building, because the world building was fantastic. This is a very fleshed out, interesting world that is ripe with adventure. There's lots and lots of things to do. You can fight pirates and mercenaries and steal stuff and save stuff and go meet people, go to clubs. The character can get drunk. There's just a lot to do. You can meet fun characters. You can meet very ominous characters. It's a rich world with a lot of stuff going on. So world building is number 2. Number 3 is the actual fighting aspect of the game, which is the meat of the game. I mean, it's built around basically, a third-person shooter, actually. I was going to say first-person shooter. Third-person shooter. And with a neat little mechanism, you have this squad of 2 characters of your choice. You build up a stable of characters, people you meet, and then you need to go fight the thing, so pick 2 of them. And That is a very interesting mechanism. The guns were tedious in the first game. They oversimplified them in the second game, and I think they got them, if not perfect, pretty good. I think people underestimate Mass Effect 3. Like everyone says Mass Effect 3 was the weak one because they didn't like aspects of the story, and there are good criticisms of that. But Mass Effect 2 oversimplified some stuff, like the way armor, you can barely control stuff. With the guns, you have barely any control over what you have as far as weapons go. You pick the best gun you have, and they're almost indistinguishable, and it's really hard to figure out what does what. The adding weapon customization and making the guns more different and making the differences between them more significant and having the firing range where you could test the guns out, all of those are awesome. Those are awesome and important. Let's see, where were we? Thing number 3 was the actual fighting mechanics. Add in the powers that the characters have, like the biotics. Particularly by the third game, you have stuff like Reeve and Lash that are just neat, that can just do cool things. I mean, I'm playing another playthrough, and man, I'm ruling with Lash. I mean, I'm just loving just tossing guys around like there's no tomorrow. I'm having a blast doing that. I rarely get to shoot people because I'm busy throwing guys wherever I don't want them to be, into wherever I don't care where they are. It's awesome. Thing number 4 is the exploration, and that has to go at the bottom of the list, because as much as they've tried to push it as an aspect of this game, the you're in space, so explore space. It's actually the weakest part of the game. They try to do different mechanisms where you land on different planets, and then you run around in the Mako, and that was like, you're really just finding locations. There's not a lot between here and there to find. You find it or you don't. In which case you're just randomly running into it. Or in the second game you do the planet scanning, which is just a tedious mini game that gets you resources, and it's just a time waster. It's wasting time in between doing fun stuff. The third game did the scanning where you're actually scanning an entire solar system, but you have to be careful because then if you scan too much, Reapers will show up. This, I'm finding, once again, it's the part of the game that I'm enduring so I get to play the rest of the game and have fun. The exploration just never works. I have heard that for Andromeda, they'd actually recreated sort of No Man's Sky, the aspect of infinite, procedurally generated worlds, and funnily enough, when they finished it and they got it to work, it was no fun. They couldn't figure out how to make it enjoyable, so they just dropped that entire aspect of it. They went from infinite worlds to like 10 or something like that. So yeah, that's what Mass Effect is. It's strengths and weaknesses, and what makes it great. What makes it really fun, interesting, sci-fi setting. It's the setting and the characters and the races and all that stuff that makes it something you can obsess over. And that's why it's a thing we care about, because it's very good in particularly those first 3. It's just fantastic. Getting into part 2. So part 2 of this, I should just start a new video.